Would bow your heads, please. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for this time of year, and we just ask that you please be with the farmers as they're doing their harvest and keep them safe. Please be with all of our men and women that's in the service, Lord. Protect them and bring them back home safely in due time. And we ask that you please be with the local front line, whether it's law or fire, police, or ambulance, emergency workers on the front line, Lord, in the hospitals and on the ambulances. Please give them that protection that only you can do. We thank you for your Son. We thank you for that Holy Spirit. We ask that you give us the wisdom and knowledge to do what's pleasing in your eyes today before we are done with business. We ask it all in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner Hale. Our first item of business is approval of claims. Moving that to the front of the agenda due to the software changes that have been implemented in the auditor's office. They'll proceed with issuing checks later this morning after we approve the claims voucher. You'll see from September 4 payroll, the county portion of PERF, as well as the county portion of FICA, as well as payroll from September 18th. And then our accounts payable is in the amount of $2,361,281.04. You'll notice a slightly different format to the voucher. Dan, do we have any holds or?
I didn't see it.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve the claims voucher as presented has been made. Is there a second? Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes by a vote of 3-0. Next on the agenda, we have Ms. Stephanie Elliott for a discussion about early voting. That will be taking place here, and some possible changes to parking and other accommodations to make that process a little easier. Good morning, Stephanie.
Thank you. So we were thinking about running them down the sidewalk past the treasurers, there where the windows are, and coming back through these back doors and just using that third portion of this room and then back out. Trying to keep people outside the building as much as possible. So our backup plan when it rains is to come in the front doors, down that hallway, back through and out the back side and to the front of the building. So we're going to need a lot of help with that. We've already had people coming to the basement wanting to vote, and it's not even started. You know, people get in that same little plan where I've always voted in the basement of the administration building. So we're going to have lots of signs.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've worked with Josh. I think he's working on a little bit of parking. You want to talk a little bit?
I gave you all an exhibit. I just printed off of Elevate and I added some blue lines. We've spoken with the fitness center next door. We've spoken with the public library. You see those as blue rectangles on the bigger blue rectangles. We've also highlighted all the areas where there are on-street parking that's not prohibited. Because of the extra needs that have both come from Ms. Elliott as well as our treasurer, we're going to have a lot of people coming through this building. And so we wanted to talk with you all. Would it be okay to send out a memo asking those employees who are able and willing to consider parking in some of our other areas besides the main lots? Stephanie would like to put up some signage, specifically at the front, that does say these spots are reserved on a temporary basis for early voting. I think early voting would work well at the fitness center as well, because they have requested we would be out by 4 p.m. because they have classes that start shortly after that. So on a short-term basis, I think that could be a good lot, and it's right by the back doors where people will be voting. So those are the things we wanted to put before you all today, and we're happy to field any questions as well.
Okay, so the issues being discussed, Stephanie Elliott brought up just a different flow through the building to get people to the back portion of this room to try to avoid the basement as much as possible. Encouraging employees via a memo to park into some of these designated areas that are designated on the map here in blue, which would include a combination of street parking as well as working with the fitness center adjacent to this building, and then what is now an empty lot that the library owns on the opposite side of Main Street. I'm going to reserve a couple of parking spots up at the front here at the admin building to designate for early voting. And I think that was it, correct?
Yeah, and I will add, Norm pointed out this morning with the ground being concrete hard, we also have a couple grass lots we could encourage employees to park in as well.
Any questions or discussion from the board?
I think you have good signs. I think it's going to go smoothly, Stephanie. That's what it's all about.
Have somebody out front as many days as I can to maybe answer questions and direct people.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think all of this makes a lot of sense and could be very helpful for our process over the next couple of weeks. Do you have any questions or concerns, Norm?
No, I think some of the employees could park in the grass across the street just to help
Sure,
this lots.
absolutely. Well, if there aren't any further questions, I would entertain a motion on blessing these various requests that Josh and Stephanie have presented to us.
So moved.
Motion's been made to grant approval to all of the things that you guys have discussed here to accommodate early voting. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Thank you very much for working on that. Next, we have an update on our job descriptions and the maintenance plan that comes along with those job descriptions.
So we just wanted to give you a brief update. We have all the job descriptions. Obviously, we've gone through the budgeting process. Those job descriptions are out there. The next steps, we have some draft ordinances that we gave to Jim to start reviewing for our next meeting. But we would need to approve the job descriptions, and that will be in conjunction with the council, as well as approve the maintenance plan so we can update that on an ongoing basis. We have the documentation for both of those things that once we review, we'll put on your docket, but we just wanted to give you kind of an idea of what to expect over the next few weeks here. We would like to have that wrapped up before the year's over to be formally adopted. And Dan, I do have something to coordinate with you on that this afternoon. So that's all for now.
Any questions for Josh? Thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. Next up, we have a surplus property donation from Fayette County. This is similar to what we did about a month ago. They're going to donate to Morgan County a ScanPro 800 microfilm scanner. I'm sorry, it's going in the opposite direction. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we just need to acknowledge this resolution from what we did here about a month ago. Any questions or discussion on that? Mr. Jim, do we need any type of motion to formally accept this? I mean, it's just the executed
I don't believe so.
from their side? Okay. Next on the agenda, we have a couple of things out of County Highway, a couple of consulting agreements. Again, as we had discussed in our last meeting, this is the execution of contracts that were previously approved for various work. We have 3 things to contemplate out of County Highway. Before I go on any further, Josh, is Tony going to be able to join? Or okay. Many of you know our county engineer has been deployed to Kuwait, and is not able to be with us. So we have 3 items. One, bridge number 166, a consulting agreement with Clark Dietz, that is in your packet. Also, Bridge 49, Abraham Road with VS Engineering, that's been distributed as well. And then finally, one of the on-call agreements that Mr. Hinkle had worked out is with USI, and that agreement is in the meeting packet as well. So I'd entertain discussion and potentially a motion on these individually or together, if that pleases the board.
I would make a motion on that we approve the 166 bridge paperwork, the Bridge 49 paperwork, and also the consulting agreement with USI.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the contracts with Clark Dietz, VS Engineering, and USI as presented here in the meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0 on all 3 documents. Is Jeannie here? No, I didn't think I saw her. Morgan County Health Department has a request to lease a water cooler from Culligan. They have worked to get this arranged. Dr. Broderick has sent a cover letter indicating that the nurses in the health department would like to have a water cooler installed in the clinic waiting room. They've also indicated that this agreement could be canceled at any time, and they've included a copy of the service agreement and the proposed contract. Questions or discussion on Morgan County Board of Health renting a Culligan water cooler? If there are no discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Go ahead and give the, make a motion to bless the Morgan County Health Department to work with Culligan on the cooler that they're asking for. It's in our packet.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the agreement with Culligan and the Morgan County Health Department as presented. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries by a vote of 3-0. That completes our new business. We'll move into our old business and table of business. We have quite a few things to clean up here today. The first one being a discussion on regulating the operation of golf carts on county roadways. And Mr. Jim Wisco has done a terrific job of putting a draft ordinance together. You'll note on the agenda that says off-road vehicle discussion. We have an ordinance on the books already that deals with off-road vehicles, primarily ATVs. And in contemplating how golf carts may fit in, it was determined perhaps that a separate ordinance would be needed. And Jim has worked on that. And if you would, sir, take us through what you've put together.
Sure. Well, the chief reason to have it treated separately than off-road vehicles, and I think it ends with a, excuse me, with a clause that any existing ordinance this trumps any existing ordinance that contradicts it, but statute likely in the last 10 or 15 years, I believe, when the legislature started adopting rules specific to golf carts, statute defines an off-road vehicle and a golf cart differently. So, you know, we should follow as well. I think that the primary items for discussion are how to determine which roads they may travel on, whether or not we would want to have a permit required and how to administer that. And there's one other item I wanted to bring bring to your attention. If I can- But those are the most major. Certainly, it's more often, I mean, I looked at several municipalities, including Martinsville, including several counties. Most certainly have an application process, which isn't, too more complex than showing proof of insurance and the headlights and taillights and slow-moving vehicle emblem and paying a fee. That was, I guess, another portion that's in your discretion of what that fee would be for a sticker or a license of some nature. That gives the opportunity to vet, compliance before they hit the road, in theory anyway. I have that they can travel on any road with a posted speed of 35 miles per hour or less. Certainly, that's probably the most difficult item to gauge in the sense that you could try to list streets and roads, you could try to make that 30 or 25 or 40. So that's, probably the most difficult decision is how to fairly administer that. With that being said, and of course, I included a template of a inspection form for the permit, which is, like I said, pretty straightforward. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions, but those are the two major kind of items for discussion within that.
I know on the off-road ordinance, it actually identifies roads that they're not allowed on. Couldn't we actually just use that as well? Like Landersdale and Hadley, Greencastle, some of our major
We certainly.
county roads.
You certainly could, and then, whether that's inclusive of everything we wanted to, I mean, that's, ultimately, up to you guys. That's what Commissioner Voiles and I were talking about before the hearing, is that list, incorporating that, and then I guess, of course, we could add to it as you see fit.
Yeah. My big thing, have you already talked to the sheriff about this?
We have not, so there's another big aspect of how we administer that, and I don't see him here, but certainly, of course, there's a fee that can help offset some of the time and effort that goes into that, but nonetheless, how exactly that's administered is difficult. I know here in the city, you basically go to City Hall and they find an available officer within, you have to wait until they find somebody and they come and look at it, and it takes just a few minutes. Of course, countywide deputies in the city, you can drive your golf cart to City Hall and have them look at it, and that's that. If you're talking about somebody in Canby, how do we administer that? I agree is a difficult decision. Something that his input would be needed.
I think that's definitely where it ought to fall at, and it wouldn't be much difference out in the county of BIN inspection. If somebody's needing that, you could actually call in and have them ask for a golf cart inspection to try to get it permitted. I don't want to speak for the sheriff. Mr. Rogers would be good at that, a lot much better at that than me, but that's my thinking. If they go along with it, I think it's way past due though, so. Thank you for drafting it up. It is a great starting point.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly one of the bigger issues we would have to contemplate. And of course, this is a draft presented today for discussion. There won't be any action taken on this. Chief, among the things that we would need to do is talk to the sheriff about their interest in participating in a permit process versus not. As you've noted in your memo, Jim, it's not required under any Indiana code. So on the regulation side, you've largely stuck, I think, wisely to existing IC code under the Indiana Traffic Code, Title IX. It's already been brought up about, would we prohibit certain highly traveled roads like we've done with the off-road vehicle ordinance, which of course Commissioner Hale and Voiles have already mentioned. You bring up the point that if we do that, which I am inclined to think we probably should, that then raises the question, is that list of roads comprehensive enough It probably is not. There were about 7 roads, I think, identified as highly traveled or potentially dangerous for ATV use. Just doing a quick kind of thinking across the county, we've got quite a few more than that might be problematic. Of course, for the benefit of the audience, the genesis of this was a request out of a neighborhood in the county that is actually on a golf course, specifically Heartland Crossing. Several residents asked about the ability to drive a golf cart to and from their home to the golf course. Right now, that's prohibited under our existing ordinances because our off-road vehicle ordinance prohibits the use of golf carts on public streets. So that's what we're working on. And then there are some exemptions made for parades, festivals, special events, things of that nature, which I think make a lot of sense. So I think what I'm hearing is our primary food for thought is, do we exclude certain roads because of the danger that they impose? And then discussing with the sheriff the interest level in a permit process, and then their potential participation in that.
That'd be correct, and I'd point out, to be clear, of course, they're prohibited on state highways. They can cross state highways. They're prohibited from other travel on state highways. And of course, this, any municipality, this wouldn't apply, so this just county roads. That's basically the decisions, and I'll be happy to share a copy of this with Sheriff Myers between now and next meeting, and talk to him about it too.
I also think with I-69, the new frontage roads and all that, you're gonna wanna add some more than the original 7 anyway, so.
Yeah.
Great job, Doug.
Well done. Any other comments or discussion before we move on? And we'll take this up, of course, at our next meeting.
Well, these roads that are listed in our off-road ATV ordinance, I think they ought to be listed also, even though they are above the 35-mile-an-hour
Sure.
speed limit. But it just helps call your attention to the fact that they are a dangerous road. And even though people may not see where the signs are that spells out the speed limit, why this just helps to educate.
Agreed. I agree with that. Any other comments? Back on our agenda for October 19th. That moves us to farm lease properties. Is there any further discussion we need to have on that today?
Well, I know that publication notice is required in either of 2 options, and then the discussion that Josh and I had recently was whether or not we would, one option is a little bit more formal and requires an appraisal process of these properties, which I don't know that has occurred in the past. However, there is another section that alleviates that obligation, and I've just, before the meeting here, was reading some case law that I think would allow us to do that if you so choose. Basically, would require a written determination adopted by the commissioners to indicated that that more formal process, including an appraisal, was not feasible, and to authorize proceeding without it. And in looking at some of the reasons that other units have put forth as far as a couple different cases in the Court of Appeals, time to administer the process, cost, cumbersome, et cetera, were viable reasons. So perhaps I have a notice prepared. It was kind of just the decision of which of those needed to occur. So if we're inclined to go that route, I could draft a written determination in accordance with that statute and have the notice tweaked, ready to go along with that, if that's what we'd want to do.
Discussion from the board on that particular issue?
I am fine with doing it that way as far as doing the appraisals. I just, I don't see that being necessary, especially on some of the FEMA properties. I mean, you got some pretty small acreage that I just don't think you could even start to justify the cost of doing them, so.
I'd agree with that as well. Some of these parcels are so small. You know, if we're able to justify a less formal process, it'd probably be beneficial to the process and to the taxpayers to proceed with the regular public notice that we've done in the past.
I agree.
So Jim, if that does end up being our inclination, we would need to take no further action today.
Correct, not today. We would, I'd circulate for the next meeting a written determination in accordance with statute for you to consider and adopt, and then if that's adopted, we'd proceed with the publication notice and go from there.
What are your thoughts, Norman?
Will that work for getting bids back in and considering them on our first meeting in November? As far as advertising and so on?
Notice has to be published twice, at least a week apart. And the last one, I believe, a week prior to the meeting, so I'm trying to do that calendaring.
It
in
might
my
push us
head.
to the second November meeting.
Probably. Yeah, and that's not gonna kill us.
But it sounds like we need to justify our reasoning for being exempt to the more formal process, or we need to adopt the more formal process one way or the other. So I'm thinking that we're probably not going to make the first meeting in November either way. It probably have to be the second.
The publication notice is required either way, and I
Sure.
think just by a quick look at the calendar, correct, I don't think we could in that time. But I do think that I'm comfortable after having reviewed a couple cases that there's sufficient justification to deviate from that more formal process.
If it's okay with the board, let's entertain a motion on authorizing Jim to pursue the exemption to the more formal appraisal process, and he can report back at the meeting on the 19th.
Go ahead and make a motion that we give Jim blessing to go ahead and draft up the process to do the less formal option he's presented this morning.
We have a motion on the floor to instruct Mr. Wisco to pursue a letter noting our exemption to the more formal process. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. That should allow us to keep moving pretty close to our normal time frame. Next item on our agenda, a couple of things that we'll discuss here together would be our EMS fee schedule, which would be an amendment to ordinance 1-4-1, and then also the corresponding agreement with MedBill, our billing service that would supplement or also codify our new fee schedule. Mr. Warren?
Good morning.
Morning, Donnie.
A little history on the fee schedule as far as when we entered into negotiations with MedBill. They had come to us with a a charge or a compensation schedule from them that was higher than what we had paid previously. We were looking at, back in January, February timeframe, we've been working with them on a spreadsheet that they'd sent us to look at what our cost per patient transported is for the service. And at that time, it was around $1,700 per patient. And part of the reflection on that and the determining factor on why that was because of our fee schedule. And of the agencies that MedBill currently services, we were in the bottom 5% of those agencies as far as our fee schedule. We put some numbers together to look at what it was going to be, and when we sat down for negotiations, they handed us a copy of what Madison Township was using. And at that time, it made sense to try to make things mirror as much as possible here in the county. So that's what we've done as far as the fee schedule and how it's laid out. You will see increases in mileage, but we do act as patient advocates in that arena, as we do a lot of different areas of EMS. Patients are informed that their hospital of choice may not be one that is going to, while it can treat their injuries or their illness, may not be covered by their insurance just because we have to pass other capable hospitals for treating that exact same condition or injury. That would mean to the patient that they would get stuck with the additional mileage charges instead of the insurance paying the full amount. Other things that we have had in here is a decrease. Obviously, this will decrease the patient cost for service as far as what we're paying out of pocket for the county. It would reduce it from about $1,700 down to about $1,000 per transport. Revenue-wise, that would see an increase at the top end of about $1.7 million per year in revenue generated. It does include the addition of a treat no transport, which is now authorized for certain instances. So in a case where we may have to go on a individual, say diabetic or the like, we could treat that patient, and when they come to, they're completely coherent. They're able to say, I don't want to go to the hospital. I live this way. This is a normal for me. We can actually bill for that medication that we've used and the services rendered up to a certain amount. We're authorized to do that by CMS, and there is at least one Blue Cross Blue Shield right now that allows for treatment transport.
Donnie, approximately what percentage of our patients have the services covered first by their health insurance provider?
Some form of insurance, whether it be Medicare, Medicaid, is upwards of 70 to 80%. It's a lot less self-pay than what MedBill had anticipated when we started the service.
And just a note on the ordinance as well, that as far as the fee schedule that Donnie's outlined, with the addition of the treat no transport, the fees would be increased to match the fees charged by Madison Township EMS. But particularly in F, G, and H, I think it's worth noting that patients that self-pay would be entitled to an immediate 50% discount of the fees.
That goes in line with what the other
It's actually more generous than a lot of the others, but certainly within the range.
Right.
Also, there would not be requirements to pay for our EMS employees and their family, and then we've extended a 50% discount to all public safety personnel whose agency that they work for primarily provides services to Morgan County and its municipalities. So
right.
I think those things are of note as well. On one hand, you hear, well, we're raising the fees. And yes, that is true. We're also raising them to be more comparable in the region, but also extending fairly generous breaks as well for self-payers and those that work in public safety. Any questions or discussion on that? I will say, for the benefit of the other two commissioners, Donnie had asked me to participate with a meeting with MedBill on this issue a couple of months ago. They provided extensive justification for how they arrived at these charges. Any questions or discussion?
I will add that by us adopting this fee schedule, it will allow us to maintain the 5.85% charge from MedBill. Plus, it will decrease their first offer of 30% on claims and collections and only raise our claims and collections by 3%.
Yeah, and that's on the second piece with the MedBill contract. We had a little more negotiating leverage with MedBill if we were going to have a little higher fees charged. And so they were pretty generous in coming back with altered terms for our MedBill agreement, which is the next item on our agenda. Any other questions or discussion? If so, I would entertain a motion. And Jim, would you remind me if an amendment requires a waiver of a second reading or a unanimous vote? I do not recall.
I believe that, yes, a unanimous vote.
Go ahead and make a motion that we amend ordinance 1-4-1 as presented, as well as the waiving of the second reading of the majority vote of the board.
Motion on the floor to approve amendment to ordinance number 1-4-1, which considers fees charged by our EMS agency with a waiver on the second reading included in the motion. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion or questions? Not hearing any. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries by a vote of 3-0.
Thank you, Donnie. Thank you, Jim, on that.
Any questions about the MedBill contract?
So that brings up to the second item related to EMS, which is the execution of our MedBill billing service agreement. It was drafted based on anticipating the ordinance change. So the changes that you see deal with compensation to MedBill based on their negotiation process with us. I believe everything else in the document has remained the same.
Yeah, the only slight alteration to the agreement, and it was in what Jim had taken a look at, and it's also in yours as well. There is a $995 fee that will be charged to us one time during the year, and that's just for ESO reachback so that we can go back and take a look at how patient outcomes were, and that can be used for QA, QI, and also for educational purposes.
Any further question or discussion? All those, or entertain a motion.
Go ahead and make a motion, we approve the MedBill Corporation billing service agreement as presented.
We have a motion to approve the MedBill agreement as presented. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries by a vote of 3-0.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is an MOU with Johnson County. We are still waiting for them to return that document, so we don't have anything to consider on that today. That will may be the only thing from our table of business that we have to continue to pend, but right now that ball is in their court, which moves us on to our mass gathering ordinance discussion, which I'll turn over to Jim as well for a final update on. Essentially where we are at this point is a clean document that reflects all of the changes that we've discussed in previous meetings.
Yes, I believe and hope that's the case. I know that I've talked with Sheriff Myers throughout this process. Josh has been a great help in helping me edit a couple different versions. I think that from the last time, there was one code site that was among a litany of requirements that was omitted. That's included. We also included a reference to Chapter 35 because it collects a fee. We cleaned up a couple spots in the application form. Again, this is very substantially mirrors Indiana code. I did contact the General Counsel of the Indiana Department of Health regarding the fee that it indicates in statute that I think $100 or a portion of that fee is to be sent to the state. However, she couldn't find anyone in her department who was familiar with collecting it, so. And along that same line, we would essentially, a letter from the sheriff or some other document that we could create would suffice as the permit or license, as they didn't have any standard form that they used. As we've discussed, increases the size of an event that would trigger this requirement from 500 people to 5,000 people. It would exclude churches, events at schools for the most part, festivals and those sort of things. It would, largely come down to at that amount of events held on private property, and not just that many people, but that would also continue to take place for 18 hours. And then, of course, provides penalties that also come from statute for noncompliance, either by not complying with the license once you get it or ignoring it altogether. Be happy to try to answer any other questions, but I think that, like I said, I've talked to Sheriff Myers throughout, and I think he's happy with this. There's, ultimately the statute dictates that the sheriff is responsible for issuing this, but we've tried to take some of the administrative burden off of him in that, and I think he's satisfied with that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
My only two questions, Jim. If you go right to page 5, the medic first aid service, I understand if we're going to be asking them to provide an ambulance on site, I understand that. But then if you go back here to licensing requirement, if you go down to 10, 11, 12, it's actually stating over a certain number of people have to have a doctor or a registered nurse.
Where are you at in the second part?
On the licensing requirement.
Paragraph
Go to
10.
Yep, 10, 11, and 12. I don't have a problem with 12. I just think that it'd be a little cost prohibitive to have a doctor or nurse.
I
actually attend,
couldn't
so.
disagree. This whole list, however, comes straight from
State code.
statute. And I would note, I guess, one physician for every 10,000 people and one nurse for every 5,000 people. But those are all requirements from statute.
My only other thing is on the notification part of it, it says may be required as a condition to surrounding residents and everything. Who's going to make that decision whether it's required or not required when it says may be required? That's my only.
Well, that's,
Everything else I love.
I don't know if I have an immediate answer for that. I think that, I don't recall if the statute required that, or that, notification on page 8 of the application. This application included a couple items that, for instance, I think there was an item regarding an electrical, to the extent it was relevant, and electrical access, electrician. That came from the form that I doctored and tweaked to get to this point, and that's not a statutory requirement. The notice, I don't believe, is either. We could take it out. We could certainly, I think there'd be discretion on behalf of, well, whoever it is. I understand the point as far as.
Should be from the sheriff.
Right, I mean, I think he would have discretion, of course.
Okay.
Other questions or discussion? Not hearing any, I'd entertain a motion.
Go ahead and make a motion. We approve the Morgan County mass gathering ordinance as well as the application.
I will note that it is an amendment to an existing ordinance. We have a motion on the floor to approve an amendment to our mass gathering ordinance, which is essentially an entire rework of it, has been made. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries by a vote of 3-0. Thank you, Jim. Jim and the sheriff, and lots and lots and lots of work on this. I've been to a meeting in a while. You know we've been talking about this for a long time because there are always unintended consequences, and we wanted to try to do our best to avoid those. So thank you very much for that. It occurred to me while we were talking about that I skipped over the street naming commission. Josh, what do we need to deal with there? That committee's been formed. We're working on setting a date. Is that essentially it? Okay. So the committee has been formed as we had prescribed in a previous meeting, and all of us are coordinating with Tony on setting a date to get together. All right, that brings us down to other business, the first of which are minutes from September 4, September 21, and then a little correction from the minutes on July 6th. And then all of those are included in your meeting packet as well. And Deb, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the correction from July was simply Harrison Township was used instead of Monroe Township. Okay.
Motion on the minutes?
Motion to approve all minutes as presented, including our correction from July 6th, has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. We have one tort claim from a vehicle accident that's come in from Ken Nunn Law Office. Entertain a motion to forward to our liability carrier.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Okay, we have a couple of courthouse events to discuss. I'll go in order of what I have in the meeting agenda. Is there a representative from Bars on Fire CrossFit? Bethany.
And actually, I need to let you know that this event I found out this morning, they're actually postponing it. So I won't be asking for courthouse use for the 18th.
Okay. Postponing sometime into the future then? Quite a
Well,
ways, or?
I was just, I spoke to Bars on Fire. Well, they contacted me actually about doing this event, and they started speaking about that they'd like to do it at the courthouse. I said, well, if you want to do it at the courthouse, then you have to, of course, get approval. There's a process for that. If you want to do it, we have to get the form into Deb today, so this was last Monday, to get in on the agenda for today. And so they were all for it, but then this morning when I spoke with them, they haven't been able to move forward and get as much done as that they had hoped. So they just don't think they can get it
Okay.
finished together by then.
And I'm sorry, Bethany, Deb gave me your email this morning, but
Oh,
in
that's okay.
getting,
Yeah.
and so she did her part.
Yes.
I called you up for no reason because I hadn't had a chance to read that yet.
Oh, that's okay.
So I see
No,
that,
that's fine.
and then we'll just anticipate hearing back from you some point in the future when you have a
Yeah.
better time.
Did you want me to give an update on the tree lighting?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
Okay, so I have sort of an update for the tree lighting, or as far as putting lights on that tree, and also the usage for the 12th, or I don't know if you want to go ahead and just speak about receiving permission to use the courthouse and the tree. It's up to you.
I'm good with all that, but the commissioner that thought that maybe you should come back at a later
He
date
just
just
walked
stepped
away.
out. So,
Okay, do you want me to come back up in a little bit, or another time? Doesn't matter, you let me know.
I mean, I need him on to,
Yeah.
these next couple of agenda items are, some of them are specifically things he wants to address, so we'll just wait for him to come back.
Okay. All right.
We could go ahead and knock out the 2020 meeting schedule amendment. There, we had a minor correction to that. Any questions or discussion on the amendment to our 2020 meeting schedule?
Our
Entertaining-
last meeting of the month of December was the 31st. Is that have to be to meet Dan's scheduling? If not, why?
If it is, then we are probably going to, or not probably, I've decided, we're not going to pay claims twice in December going forward. But rather that we will just have an additional amount of bills that we encumber over to the first meeting in January for the commissioners. We've been changing our processes and rethinking how we pay claims. And one is that I don't see the necessity of having two claims payments in December. So if you're having that meeting only for that purpose, that won't be necessary.
Well, I was wondering about changing it to Monday, the 28th.
Oh, well,
We don't need it at all, why?
yeah, we're not going to have, we're getting ready to send that communication out to all the offices and departments about that we will not pay claims twice in December, but rather have them all paid in the first meeting in January.
So what I'm hearing is that normally the only reason why we do a third meeting in December is to approve a final claims voucher. What I'm hearing is that that won't be necessary this time because you only intend to do that once in January, or I'm sorry, in December. The
Right.
other claims will be encumbered and would be executed in January,
Right, first Monday in January, or the first meeting in January.
first meeting in January. So
Yes.
our options are to continue to have a third meeting on the schedule, and if so, Norman's pointed out that that is right now pegged for the 31st of December. So we could either move that meeting or scratch it all together. What does everybody think?
We're gonna do one, or need to have one, I suggest Monday, the 28th at 9:30.
Yeah. That might make the most sense, is just to certainly agree with moving it off of the 31st, and we can put it on the 28th, and then if we find that we don't have a need to meet, since we're not going to be contemplating any claims, then we could always cancel the meeting.
Right.
So if someone wants to put that in the form of a motion,
I will.
motion being that we move the meeting on December 31st to the 28th, noting that it could quite possibly be canceled. That motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, Bethany. Sorry about that. So Bethany's going to discuss the date on the 12th of October, I'm sorry, the 12th of December.
December, yes.
That you had discussed with us at our last meeting.
Yes.
Um,
So the 12th is also the day of the cookie stroll, and we'd like to continue the family activities that we'll have available on the 6th for the day of the actual Christmas tree lighting. We'd like to continue those on the 12th, when there will be a lot of people downtown for the cookie stroll, and hopefully bring in others who might not be participating in that. So we just like, permission to use the courthouse square for that. And then also an update on putting lights on the tree that's there on the west side of the square. We just this morning received a quote from Parks Outdoor Maintenance, and so we will be doing one of two things. We will either be using Parks, purchasing the lights from them, having them install and remove the lights, or we will be just purchasing the lights and then using a truck owned by the city, which will be ran by a city employee. So I don't know if that's enough information for you. We're just really trying to make sure where we're at with the budget. But regardless, the person in the truck would be, that company would have insurance, would be experienced with the truck. And 'cause I think that was your main concern before, wasn't it, with the tree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. You're
I
good.
don't know if you have any other questions.
So what you're saying there is that you'll either hire that out to
Yes.
Parks Outdoor Maintenance, or you'll secure the lights and then the city will install those with their equipment?
Yes.
So that was on the lighting of the tree portion. So we're good there? Okay. Then, so that brings up the secondary part, which is the date of the 12th. And that's organized by the same organization?
Yes.
That you had previously
Yes.
applied for? Okay. Any questions or concerns about that?
I'm good with it.
So what I would recommend is that if we're comfortable moving forward, that we have a motion to approve the events for the dates that Bethany had previously outlined, as well as the date for the cookie stroll. And then just note that we're comfortable with those two options on lighting the tree as well. Any further discussion or questions? Not hearing any, I'd entertain a motion.
Go ahead and make a motion, we approve the lighting of the tree with, as well as the entertainment that's going to be taking place. I believe it's going to be the 5th and the 6th, and continuing that on the 12th, that Saturday as well.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the event as previously requested, with the addition of the date of the 12th for the cookie stroll. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Motion carries 3-0. Thank you, Bethany. One other event, this is at the park, Burkhart Creek Park, DNR Division of Forestry, Bev Stout. We've accommodated them in the past several times. They have requested use of the shelter house at Burkhart Creek for the date of November 10th, 2020, with a rain date of the 12th. That will be an all-day event from 8 to 4. Any questions or discussion on that? Entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we approve Burkhart Creek to Shelter House on November 10th, as well as a rain date, if necessary, is November 12th.
A motion on the floor to approve the Shelter House at Burkhart Creek as requested by DNR. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. And that completes our public property use requests. The 2020 agenda we've addressed, and that brings us up to the Community Foundation. Mr. Kenny Hale.
I was just wanting to ask the Board of Commissioners to be allowed to be on the Community Foundation account for the parks.
And we have two accounts, one for the park system in general, and then one specifically for Waverly.
Yes, and I'm not so sure you don't have it, you got a third one that's actually just for Burkhart Creek, I thought. Where there's not, they've still got it just in the parks. Okay, okay,
Or more than two.
okay.
So right now we have Josh Messmer and Deb Verley as signers on that. So the idea would be to add Commissioner Hale, who does a majority of the work in the park system. Any questions or comments, discussion on that? Not hearing any, I'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion allowing myself to be put on the Community Foundation account for Morgan County Park and Rec.
A motion to add Commissioner Hale as a signer on our Community Foundation accounts for our parks, which one for the entire park system and then one for Waverly. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
I'll abstain.
Motion carries 2-0 to 1, 2 in favor with 1 abstention. Final item on our agenda is an update on our Justice Center, formerly the Reporter Times building. And I'll call Mr. Messmer up on that. We have a couple of things to discuss.
Before we discuss that, one more thing. Bethany, I believe that we had a call from you all about putting lights on the gazebo. Do you want to address that at all?
We had thought that we would like to have a Santa in the gazebo and wanted to decorate that nicely. Depending on where we're at with social distancing and such, it may not be where the children would sit on Santa's lap. They may stand next to him or sit in another chair for a picture. But regardless, we would like to decorate the gazebo. So we would like to put lights on that. Thank you. I didn't even think about the gazebo. What are your thoughts as far as, just for that day, we'd probably have, additional decorations. The lights could stay, the lights could go immediately. That would be up to you. Other than, trying to remember if we're having Santa on the 12th as well. So we might want to keep the lights for this, at least for the 6th and the 12th, and then they can come down, or leave them up, whatever you guys would like. Take them all down at the same time with the tree, or leave it, whichever way.
I'm fine with
I don't
that.
have a problem with it personally. Any concerns about that?
Okay.
Just have the minutes reflect that we discussed that as well, and it seems there's a consensus of all three that we're good with that.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, I had told you at the last meeting I would have an update this time around, and we do. I'm not convinced that these are the final numbers, but they should be substantially close. Right now, we have a remaining balance after the latest draws that have come in of $313,835.03. And so you have two options to move forward. You can allow your lease price to increase to capture the capitalization cost 9% annually over the 10-year lease, or you can buy down the debt. You have either choice. The lease is fine with either, and it contemplates both. Of the document I sent you, if you allow your lease price to rise, you will save over the life of the lease a little over $31,000 because you're capitalizing it at 9% per year as opposed to a full tenth.
I'm good with that as well myself.
Yeah. Do you know what the estimated lease payment then would be?
Yes, it would be, over the course of the year, it'd be $118,245.15, which is $28,245.15 more than the original. It was originally 90 per year. This would add just shy of 29,000.
Josh, that number again.
The increase in the lease price would be $28,245.15.
Okay, thank you.
It's a monthly right around 9,800. I mean, certainly we were working to keep the payment around 7,500. However, additional expenses were incurred based on some of the design specifications that the prosecutor's office wanted, and also, and Title 4D has certain requirements under statute too, of course. But it is a clear savings for us not to buy that down and to pay for it monthly. As Josh highlighted, that comes to close to 31, or just a little over $31,000. So I think our first course of action is to determine affirmatively if we want to pay for this each month and allow the lease cost to increase, or if we do want to buy down the overrun to keep the lease at $7,500.
Go ahead and make a motion that we go ahead and allow the lease amount to increase as presented.
We have a motion on the floor to state that we will, according to the terms of the lease, have the lease cost increase based on the overrun. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
I'll abstain.
Motion carries by a vote of 2-0 to 1, 2 in favor, and 1 vote for abstention.
So if any other invoices trickle in, I've just been making sure that Kathy from Mr. Finneman's office and I agree on how much has been spent. To date, we do. If any other items trickle in, I will just coordinate with Dan's office, and next year, we'll have to do an additional appropriation to the budget line item that we laid out. Yes, sir.
One last thing on that. I know, working with Craig and the delays that it's taken us on getting this building ready to move into and everything, I feel like we are a little bit of the problem. Not gonna say we're no ways near all the changes were our fault, that's for sure. But I was wanting to see the appetite for the commissioners go ahead starting instead of the lease agreement the way that it was, so if we could move it back to July 1st instead of August 1st, I think that would just show good partnership and goodwill on our part, because there was a lot of changes made. Several of them was on our side, so.
So discussions or comments on amending the initiation of the lease from August 1 to July 1. As Commissioner Hale mentioned, I think the genesis of his thought on that is the amount of changes that we did make, and we certainly did contribute to slowing the process down. It's hard to say how much. Certainly there were a number of delays on their end with manpower issues and other things, but it is fair to say that, we did slow things down.
True.
Right.
Yep.
Our payments to begin when we.
It was based on move-in date. It wasn't
Correct.
set on a date.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I missed part of what you're talking about. Are you talking about?
Moving it back a month from what the lease agreement actually said. That's correct.
You're gonna have a problem with that.
Okay.
We occupy the building around the 24th or 28th of July.
Something like
Yeah,
that,
it was,
I mean,
there was a
C-
weekend in between the end of
Yeah.
July and, so it was 28th, 29th, I can't remember exactly.
technically, August 1st would be when it should start by the lease, the way that it's wrote. I mean, I understand that. I just wanted to bring it up for discussion anyway.
That the State Board of, that presents an SBOA issue.
Yep.
Is that your primary concern?
That presents a potential audit issue.
Okay. I'm fine with that then. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Kenny.
I would like to add one more about this building. In November, I've been talking with prosecutor's office. They would like to do an open house, have elected officials, some delegates from other Mooresville, Martinsville, come check out the new building. We're looking at some possible dates in November, but I want to make sure that's something you all, one, are open to, and if so, we'll coordinate with you because they would like to make sure that three of you are there.
Sure.
Yeah, it's fine.
Thanks.
Thank you, Josh.
Two other things.
That brings us to the conclusion of our agenda, but we do have Commissioner Hill has a couple items to bring up.
I know, I've got some phone calls, and I'm sure you other commissioners did as well, and I've not had a chance to talk to Scotty yet about dispatching, but I know there was an incident that took place up in Clay Township here not too long ago, and I was just wanting to maybe open it up and hear Scotty's concerns or thoughts on geo-dispatching in certain townships where you've got some agreements that's been raised with other departments, other townships, not wanting to step on their toes at all. But I think in certain situations that geo-dispatching, Scotty, we are gonna get that ambulance there faster to them without messing up the agreement leases that's in place. And I just wanna hear your thoughts on that, sir.
There's a lot of instances in the county where geo-dispatching would probably be a better, and if that's the direction the commissioners want me to take, then I would be more than glad. I know it's gonna probably step on some toes, but, it's been my position all along that closest, most appropriate is probably always best. I mean, the people that are there calling 911, wanting an emergency, they honestly don't care where it comes from or if it's from their township or not their township, they just want the help. And whoever can get there the fastest and render aid is generally your best bet.
And to me, that's what 911's all about, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I understand they got agreements, and I know Mr. Mitchell's here for Clay Township if he wants to speak on it as well, but it's still not stopping you guys dispatching to Brooklyn or somewhere else closer to where, or somewhere else where Brown is gonna be closer, or Madison going somewhere where it's gonna be closer. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, it's just.
It's not stepping really on the toes and doing away with the lease agreement or the contracts they have with them mutual aid. Well, the contracts they have with other departments, that's still in place. It's just out here where we can save time and get that ambulance to them faster. It's gonna happen. It's not really affecting you, Bill, or the townships that it is affecting.
I mean, but it's a process, and as you well know, from working with the ESNs and the 911.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's,
Yep.
it needs to be a well-thought-out and well-addressed issue as far as making sure that all of it's coordinated, ESNs and are changed, because, that's the direction everybody takes, is from the CAD and from the from the 911 and ESN, is to make sure that we're not cherry picking addresses and saying, well, just because, it's right here, this one or two addresses gets it, we need to make it all encompassing, in my opinion. And it needs to, honestly be something we look at countywide. If that's the direction you want me to take, I'm fine with that. Actually, that makes our job a little bit more on the simpler side.
Yeah, and I mean, you're also gonna have new departments, it's EMS departments possibly being built, and I mean, you're gonna have things changing as we move
Right.
forward, but I
Oh,
mean, to
yeah.
me, I know other communities already do it, other counties already do it. And I think with what arose on that situation, you got the potential for it to rise again.
Right.
I just think if we go ahead and start doing it in certain situations where it makes common sense, it's gonna work out. I know Mark Harris is here from Brown Township as well. I'd be welcome to hear his comments on it as well. That way you got Mr. Bill having a chance and Mr. Mark both. But
Yep.
that's just my thoughts.
And we have a hand for Mr. McCool as well, so.
Sorry, Mike.
We'll definitely-
I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm, like I said, I'm open to it. If somebody will give me the direction, says that this is what we're gonna do. Because like I said, my thing is, there probably won't be a lot of heartburn, but there'll be some. There's gonna be some heartburn. It's, when you start running into other people's territories, some people tend to get a little territorial, I guess.
Sure.
It happens, so.
Thank you, Scotty.
I have a representing Rutland Volunteer Fire Department. I have a concern. Jill just doesn't have, that's fine. But we're talking level of care. So we'll take our southwest area, our Clay Township. Actually, Green Township ambulance is closer, but it's a BLS ambulance. I want to make sure, my concern is patient care. I want the best patient care, the quickest possible.
Yep.
I understand in our northwest section, 950, Medic 950 is out there. But we have some concerns that, number one, the staffing right now. We start doing the geos, I know there's times we listen to the radio. Right now, staffing isn't always available. I've got it at Brown. We've got it at Brown. We know they're gonna be there. If not, we got Madison. But 950 is not staffed all the time, 916 is not staffed all the time. We know that. So you got to consider those options. And I want the best care for the patients.
And
I agree with what
Mike.
you're saying. They don't care where that ambulance comes through. But I want the best that we can get for our patients. And right now, I know I'm getting ALS care out of the north. I don't, time-wise, it may be quicker, but I'm not getting ALS for these people that need it.
No, and I agree, Mike. I definitely want the same level of care, the ALS versus BLS. I mean, there's no doubt we want the advanced life. There's no doubt about that. But I just see where it might, in certain situations, it might save us time in somebody's life, Mike. That's all I'm looking at.
And we take that into consideration.
And I know you
There's
do.
been times where we've disregarded Brown and started 950 because of the location.
Yeah.
We consider that. But I don't want the county to come in to tell me that, hey, I have to use this ambulance here, geo dispatching, when it may or may not be manned, and then there's a delay getting another. I know there's a delay. They do the best they can down at dispatch. But they're human.
I understand. One last question for Scotty and Mr. Warren both, I guess. Scotty, I know dispatching, it comes up, the ESN that's assigned, I know I used to, and Sandy's doing it now, but it comes up to the ESN assigned. Is there any kind of way, and I know they're supposed to dispatch what it shows, I very well understand that. Is there a situation where you could actually, well, I don't even think you can.
Well, our ESN and our CAD pretty much reflect the same thing. So they're actually getting it twice, and it's built that way for redundancy, because that way we don't get confusion between an ESN saying one thing and a CAD saying another. We want that reassurance that this information and that information are corresponding. If we change ESNs, then we gotta change CAD. If we change CAD, we need to change ESN.
Yeah.
We can't have those in conflict, because then we're gonna have issues.
And you cannot switch from dispatching what CAD says if we got a BLS unit only available, right? I mean, I don't see how you could possibly do it, so I think I've answered my own question. so.
It gets, can things be done? Yes. Is it best practices? Definitely not, because
I know
when
it's
things are
not.
rolling and things are moving quick, trying to remember all these little that's the reason we kind of went with response plans with the fire departments and stuff. We're trying to get away from what we call à la carte dispatching, where certain people go a certain way. It tends to cause more problems.
Oh, I know it
I
does.
mean, the response plans or recommended units works out great because the fire departments design that and they say, hey, this is what we want to take for certain piece of equipment, or certain piece of equipment, and that stuff's already popping up on the CAD, and we're able to dispatch it quicker and move things along faster. That's going to become infinitely more important as we move towards locution, because that stuff will all be pre-built in there, and, as the calls are being sped out, then it's cranking out the apparatus that needs to go.
I just had to bring it up.
Okay. Like I said,
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
willing to
McCool.
work with anybody and sit down and try to figure something out. But yeah, geo-dispatching is, if we had is ideally probably the best way to go. I mean, just from anybody you talk to in the dispatching world,
Oh, yeah.
closest, most appropriate seems to work the best.
I've got some good friends in Putnam County Dispatch, and I know that's what they do over there and stuff. It's, and also Hancock County. So. I just thought it might have alleviated a problem here, but I understand Mr. McCool's concern, ALS versus BLS. I totally understand that too. Just had to bring it up.
I'm hearing Mr. McCool's concerns also, but if the closest unit was dispatched, that doesn't preclude further units from being dispatched as well down the stream, or does it? I'm thinking that in a case where,
It's still kind of muddy in the water. It's happened to Scotty, their dispatch is still gonna have to be à la carte and going ahead and remember to go ahead and send Brown as well. So, it really is not the cleanest and
Build
best
something
way.
like that? Probably, but how, if we're gonna do that, we need to do it in an area wide and not just, this particular address or this particular street or something like that. It really needs to be more thought out because of how the ESNs and the CAD response areas work. I mean, we can punch anything we want into the CAD or the ESNs, but it gets really confusing at some point in time for everybody involved.
And for the audience, information, ESN, I'm really bad about speaking in acronyms, and I know Scotty is as well. That's your emergency network service. That's telling them what law, fire, ambulance to send to a particular address when it comes up, so. But Scotty, would you be willing to go ahead and work with Mr. Harris and Mr. Mitchell and Mr. McCool and see if there's some kind of solution you might be able to, but I'm just not seeing it without.
Yeah,
Not
I
really.
mean, that would be great. I would love to get something worked out and get Donnie involved also, because, he's
Oh,
gonna have a
yeah.
better feel for his responsibilities. Like I said, I'd like for when people call 911, get it there as fast as
As
we
we
can.
can.
And
That's
that's
what it's,
really what they're wanting too.
yeah. It's what it's all about. I'd appreciate you guys look into it and see what you can come up with. That'd be great.
Be more than willing to do that. I'm gonna be on vacation for a couple of weeks here, but we'll get something started.
Okay, hey, thank you.
we're not going to solve the issue today, but we
Nope.
do want to be respectful for the guests that are here. I saw Mr. Harris's hand. Did you want to add something to the conversation?
Thank you, Commissioners. On behalf of Brown Township, I think the geo-dispatching is a great idea. I think that's going to solve a lot of issues about getting advanced equipment out to these calls that are kind of in the outstretches of the areas that Brown Township can reach. When you folks have your ambulance company that's probably can get there quicker than us. So it just makes total sense for the geo-dispatching. And Mr. Hill, I think you took it out of my mouth a while ago. I was just going to come up and ask to be a part of that, and so I can just see exactly what the overlays are going to look like. And if we come up with some kind of plan on that we be involved in that. That way we don't negate our contracts that we have with Clay and Clay Township and the town of Brooklyn Fire. Those are obviously still in place that we have, and we just want to make sure that people are going to get the service and quality of care that they deserve whenever they call. So I'm totally on board with that. I think that's a good idea. So if we could just work together on this and we can get this implemented.
That sounds
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Scotty, I know I don't coordinate the 911, but if you'd let me know when that takes place, I would love to set in on that as well.
Okay, what I'll do is, there's a couple things. Like I said, I'm getting ready to start vacation, but maybe we can, before I go off, we can maybe get a kickoff, or at least kind of get an idea, and start getting some ideas run around together. I'll reach out to everybody here concerned after the meeting, and we'll try to maybe coordinate some times where we can just sit down and hash some things out, get some preliminary stuff started, and go from there.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you, Scotty.
Thanks.
Any other business that needs to come before the board?
One thing I just wanted to give the commissioners a head up. I have been working with Livewire, trying to do on the courthouse, trying to get lighting, going to more of the LED lighting. I know me and Josh had talked about it as well. There is options, Josh, that you can go different colors for special occasions and everything, and he's getting his prices both ways on that as well. So I would love to see that done before year's end with the courthouse, especially with having this tree lighting ceremony that's going to be taking place again. That would, I think it'd really make our downtown pop and stuff. But that's something we are working on and seeing where it's going to go. And I know Norton's been working with Tom as well, so just wanted to give you the heads up.
Thank you, Kenny. Anything further? Anything from the audience? Not hearing any, entertain a motion to adjourn until October 19.
So moved.
Motion's made. I'll second the motion. All those in favor of adjournment signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Have a